out of the corner of my eye. I'm still watching some of the hearings, and I have to say, my opinion as to whether the Democrats should have participated in this has not changed. And there have been moments that I have appreciated, but ones that you don't need to necessarily do in that committee hearing. We'll play a couple of those from yesterday. We will play a couple of the ones from today, tomorrow. And we may even, there was a clip from Sheldon Whitehouse. And longtime listeners and viewers of this program will know that going back 4 or 5 years ago now, we spent an inordinate amount of time on the Friedrichs case and on the cases that laid the groundwork for the Friedrichs case, which ultimately became, or I should say, went away because Antonin Scalia died, and then came back in the form of Janus. And this is a case that basically said, despite the near 40 years of precedent coming out of the Abood, I think it was Abood v. Detroit case, where it was found that unions in a union shop, they could not compel dues from everyone in the shop, but they could compel what was known as an agency fee because the union is doing the negotiations and they're hiring lawyers and they're spending time actually negotiating. So just like I have an agent for this business and some, I mean, not really that much, but I mean in show business, who gets 10%, the union would get a small percentage, I think it was less than 10%, for their negotiation work, which benefited everybody in the shop. And Sheldon Whitehouse, senator from Rhode Island, had a 4-minute, 5-minute exchange with Amy Coney Barrett, where he just laid out how not only did that agency fee doctrine essentially die in the Janus case, but how over the course of 7-8 years, Scalia and Alito kept inviting cases to come up through the courts to challenge that Abood doctrine and ultimately to kill it. And not only encouraged it, I mean, basically sent a signal to right-wing conservative organizations that went up and started to plaintiff shop, find an individual who could be represented. I mean, that happens both on the left and the right on some level. But what we don't usually see are judges who are not just, sort of like vaguely signaling. They are taking cases that are within this sort of, box, imagine, and they're dropping concepts that are outside the box and dropping them into the cases, maybe in the context of their dissent or maybe in their context of their of the actual ruling itself. And they seem off topic, and it seems weird to bring that in, but it is inviting these legal organizations, these outside legal organizations, to find a case to test this one element, in this instance of Abood. And there were multiple ones of that over the course of the years, and it ends up being a saga, I think, as Sheldon Whitehouse described it. And then what you get at the end of that is the death of the agency fee for unions, which materially inhibits their ability to do their job as a union. And we all know the diminishment of unions has depressed wages within and outside the union movement. I mean, it depresses it through the industry that the union is involved in. And the point that he's making here is that we can see this in other cases. Yesterday or 2 days ago, we had Mark Joseph Stern on, and he made that point about Obergefell, where just sort of out of the blue, it was brought into the dissent. I think it was Thomas and Alito's dissent. Seemingly did not need to be there, but it is their way of signaling, send us a case like this, and we will begin to dismantle certain precedents that have existed for decades. They don't do it overnight. They begin to build, like degrade the foundations for these precedents. And these precedents could very well include things like Roe v. Wade. It could include Griswold, which was the case about birth control, which undergirds Roe v. Wade. It could be a whole host of different cases. We talked about the Chevron doctrine and the delegation, the authority for Congress to delegate to agencies. Says to the EPA, we pass a law, we want clean water. It delegates to the EPA to figure out how to do that. What constitutes clean water? Because they're not scientists. They don't know how many microns of lead are healthy. And therefore, if it's in your water, it constitutes unhealthy water. They delegate that authority. Chevron doctrine says that the courts have to have deference towards those agencies' expertise. There have been for years an attempt by the 5 conservatives to slowly cut away at this to the point where all of the undergirdings, I mean, almost think about it as like as a table with 5 legs. And they keep looking for ways of like cutting one table on this side, loosening a table over here, and then one day they come in and they just push it over. And that is what 6-3 conservative justices, that is what they will do. And they will do that with a whole host of precedents that we have relied on and taken for granted in this country for decades. So that is the stakes that we're seeing. And I think the approach that the Democrats have taken in that regard have not communicated the stakes and have not communicated the travesty that has been this process that has allowed there to be a 6-3 majority on the court of conservative. It simply should not be the case that they have that type of majority. And to the extent that they were able to do it and what they needed to do, and by them I mean the Republicans, to attain that majority, Democrats have to communicate, either have to just go ahead and do what is necessary to reform the court so that we don't have all of these anti-democratic institutions ruling us, these extraordinarily anti-democratic institutions. Remember, we already have a president not elected by the majority of voters. We have a Senate dominated by the party that did not get the majority of votes cast for senators across the country. We have state houses across the country where you have the majority of voters voted for Democrats, yet Republicans retain an advantage in the number of state senators. That last part is through intense gerrymandering. And so to have a Supreme Court that is dominated by conservatives because Mitch McConnell kept that seat open for a year, it's perfectly legal, but so isn't reforming the Supreme Court in such a way that you have 11 members, 13 members, 15 members, 23 members. And the Democrats, if that is their agenda, and I don't know that it is, but it should be ours, could have done a better job in expressing the outrage that people should have based upon our situation now. But we will see. Things change around here. It seems like every other week. The election's 20 days out. That's too far for me to even grasp at this point.